Sojin Park pressed her face against the small window of the transport ship as New Geneva Station came into view. The massive structure looked like a giant wheel spinning slowly in space, with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. She had dreamed of this moment for years. Today, she would attend her first Galactic Senate meeting as a junior attaché for the Terran Coalition. The docking procedure took 30 minutes, but to Sojin, it felt like hours. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a world unlike anything she had seen before. The station's main corridor was enormous, with a ceiling so high she could barely see it. Beings from dozens of different worlds moved past her, and she tried not to stare. A tall, crystalline creature that looked like living glass walked by, its body catching the light and throwing rainbows on the walls. Behind it came something that looked like a floating jellyfish made of pure energy, pulsing with different colors as it moved. Sojin had studied these species in school, but seeing them in person was different. The Velthari were the crystal people, and the Luxari were the energy beings. Each species looked so different from humans that it was hard to believe they all came from the same universe. "First time seeing the real thing?" a voice asked behind her. Sojin turned to see a middle-aged human man in a dark blue uniform. He had kind eyes and a slight smile that made her feel less nervous. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm Sojin Park, the new junior attaché." "Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim," the man said, extending his hand. "I've been waiting to meet you. Ready for the security check?" Sojin nodded and followed him toward a series of scanning booths. This was where all visitors had to be checked before entering the Senate chambers. She had read about the security procedures, but she was not prepared for what she saw. The line split into different sections based on species. The Velthari were placing their ceremonial crystal blades into special containers. The aquatic Mordan were removing what looked like harpoon guns from their environmental suits. Even the peaceful-looking Zephyri were handing over small devices that Sojin guessed were some kind of weapons. But when she and Ambassador Kim approached the human security line, something strange happened. The security officer, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, simply waved them through. Sojin looked down at her belt, where her standard-issue sidearm hung openly, then looked at Ambassador Kim, who was carrying what appeared to be a ceremonial sword along with his diplomatic case. "Excuse me," Sojin said to the security officer. "Don't we need to surrender our weapons?" All 4 of the alien's arms stopped moving. It looked at her with what might have been confusion, though it was hard to tell with such a different face. "Humans are exempt from disarmament protocols," it said in a mechanical voice. "Please proceed to the Senate chambers." So Jin felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as other aliens in nearby lines turned to look at them. She hurried to catch up with Ambassador Kim, who was already walking toward the main Senate building. "Why didn't we have to give up our weapons?" she asked when she caught up to him. Ambassador Kim's smile faded a little. "That's a long story. You'll understand better after you've been here a while." The Senate chambers were even more impressive than the station corridors. The room was circular and huge, with seats arranged in rings that rose up toward the ceiling. Each section was designed for different types of beings. The Mordan had water-filled booths, the Luxari had special energy-conducting platforms, and the Velthari had crystal formations that seemed to grow from the floor. In the center of it all was a speaking platform, where a tall reptilian being was addressing the assembly. Sojin recognized the species as Rex Thani, one of the older races in the galaxy. The creature's voice was deep and carried easily through the chamber. "The mining proposal for System Kepler 442 will now be put to vote," the Rex Thani was saying. "All those in favor of allowing unrestricted mining operations." As the session continued, Sojin found herself watching the humans around her more than listening to the speeches. Every human delegate, attaché, and security officer was armed. Some carried traditional firearms, others had energy weapons, and a few had what looked like ancient swords or knives. Yet none of the thousands of aliens in the chamber seemed worried about this. In fact, many of them kept glancing at the human sections, as if checking that they were still there. During a break in the proceedings, Sojin was surprised when one of the Velthari delegates approached her. the crystal being moved with a tinkling sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Forgive the intrusion," the alien said in a voice that sounded like music. "I am Counselor Jixem. I could not help but notice you are new among the human delegation." "Yes, sirs or ma'am." "I'm sorry, I don't know the proper address," Sojin stammered. "Counselor will do fine," Jixem said with what might have been amusement. "I have a question that has puzzled my people for some time. Is it true that humans are the galaxy's most trusted peacekeepers? Is that why you alone are permitted to carry weapons in these sacred chambers?" Sojin opened her mouth to answer, but realized she had no idea what to say. She looked around and saw Ambassador Kim approaching. "Counselor Jixem," Kim said with a polite nod. "I see you've met our newest team member." "Indeed," the crystal being replied. "I was asking about your people's unique status regarding weapons. Surely such trust is not given lightly." Ambassador Kim's expression grew serious. The friendly smile disappeared, and for a moment Sojin saw something dark in his eyes. "Trust has nothing to do with it, Counselor," Kim said quietly. "It's about necessity." Jixim's crystal body seemed to dim slightly. "I see. Perhaps I have misunderstood." "Perhaps you have," Kim said. "If you'll excuse us, we should return to our seats." As they walked back to the human section, Sojin's mind raced with questions. What did Ambassador Kim mean by necessity? Why had the crystal alien seemed almost afraid after Kim's response? And why did every other species in the galaxy seem perfectly comfortable with humans carrying weapons that could kill dozens of them in seconds? "Ambassador Kim," she said as they sat down, "what did you mean when you said it was about necessity? What necessity?" Kim looked at her for a long moment. Around them, the Senate session was resuming, but his attention was focused entirely on her. "Sojin," he said finally, "what do you think would happen if someone tried to attack the delegates in this room right now?" She thought about it. "Well, security would respond, and what would the Velthari do?" Sojin considered this. The crystal people were known for being thoughtful and deliberate. They would probably call for order and begin discussing the proper response. And the Mordan? They'd retreat into their water tanks for safety. The Luxari? They'd try to understand the attackers' motivations and find a peaceful solution. Kim nodded slowly. And what would humans do? The answer came to her immediately, and with it a chill ran down her spine. We'd fight. We'd fight to protect everyone else, even if it meant dying. "Now you're beginning to understand," Kim said softly. "By the end of today's session, you'll know the whole truth. And once you do, you'll never look at our privilege the same way again." As the Rexthani speaker called for attention and the session resumed, Sojin stared at the weapon on her belt with new eyes. For the first time, it felt heavy. The lunch break came 3 hours later, and Sojin was grateful for the chance to stretch her legs. The morning session had been filled with debates about trade routes and mining rights, but her mind kept returning to Ambassador Kim's cryptic words. As they walked through the station's food court, she noticed how other species seemed to give the human delegates a wide berth. Not out of fear exactly, but with something that looked like respect mixed with caution. "Ambassador," she said as they found a table in a quiet corner, "you said I'd understand by the end of the session, but I need to know now. What did you mean about necessity?" Kim looked around the food court, watching as various aliens went about their business. A group of Zephyri were sharing what looked like glowing fruit at a nearby table. Their movements were slow and peaceful like everything they did. "Tell me, Sojin," Kim said. "What do you know about the Senate protection incident of 2341? Sojin searched her memory. She had studied galactic history in school, but that date didn't sound familiar. "I don't think I've heard of it." "Most species prefer not to talk about it," Kim said. "But it's the reason we're sitting here armed, while everyone else went through weapon scanners. Let me tell you what really happened." Kim pushed his food aside and leaned forward. 46 years ago, the Galactic Senate worked very differently. Back then, the disarmament protocols applied to everyone, including humans. The idea was simple. If no one had weapons, there could be no violence, pure diplomatic discourse, they called it. That sounds reasonable, So-Jin said. It was reasonable, Kim agreed. Until it wasn't. The man in charge of human security back then was Captain Jin-Soo Lee. Good man, career military, but he didn't like the no weapons rule. He thought it made everyone vulnerable. His superiors told him to follow protocol anyway. Kim paused to take a sip of his drink. Around them, the food court buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, but their corner felt separate from it all. The incident happened during a session about territorial disputes in the Outer Rim, Kim continued. Boring stuff mostly. The Zephyri delegation was there, the Mordan had sent their best diplomats, and even the reclusive Keth Mori had shown up. Everything seemed normal until the Zephyri started dying. So-Jin felt a chill. Dying? What happened? Poison, Kim said simply. A biological weapon that was specifically designed to target Zephyri physiology. Someone had released it into the air system that fed their environmental booth. The Zephyri delegates started collapsing one by one, and it became clear that whoever did this wanted them all dead. But who would do such a thing? That came out later. It was a faction of Velthari extremists who wanted to claim the Zephyri homeworld for its crystal formations. They figured if they eliminated the Zephyri leadership, their people would be too disorganized to resist colonization. Kim's expression grew darker. Now here's the important part, So-Jin. When those Zephyri started dying, do you know what happened? So-Jin shook her head. The Mordan delegates immediately sealed their water tanks and refused to come out. They said it was too dangerous and they needed to protect themselves first. The Luxari began a formal debate about whether they should intervene and what the proper protocols were for this situation. The Rexthani called for order and demanded that everyone remain calm while they figured out who was responsible. And the humans? Kim smiled grimly. Captain Jin-Soo Lee broke protocol. He ordered his security team into the Zephyri section immediately. No weapons, remember, but they didn't care. They used whatever they could find, table legs, pieces of broken crystal from the damaged booths, their bare hands. Lee himself tackled one of the Velthari attackers barehanded. So-Jin could picture it in her mind. While other species debated and protected themselves, humans had rushed toward danger to help people they barely knew. They saved 17 Zephyri lives that day, Kim said. 3 humans died doing it, including Captain Lee. He was crushed by falling debris when the attackers tried to bring down part of the chamber ceiling to cover their escape. That's horrible, So-Jin whispered. It was, Kim agreed. But it was also revealing. After the incident, the Senate commissioned a study. They wanted to understand why different species had reacted so differently to the same crisis. Kim pulled out a small tablet and showed So-Jin an official-looking document. Dr. Yoon-hee-yoon led the research team. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in comparative psychology across species. What she found changed everything. So-Jin read the summary on the screen. The language was technical, but the conclusions were clear. It says here that humans have something called protective aggression syndrome. What does that mean? It means that when humans see someone in danger, their brains react automatically, Kim explained. We don't think about political consequences or personal safety first. We see a threat to others and we move to eliminate it. Every other known species has survival instincts that put their own safety first, or they rely on group decision-making processes before taking action. But that doesn't sound like a syndrome, So-Jin said. It sounds like being decent. Kim laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what makes it uniquely human, So-Jin. Every other species thinks their way of handling crises is normal. The Mordan believe that protecting yourself first makes sense because you can't help others if you're dead. The Velthari think that careful deliberation prevents mistakes that could make situations worse. The Luxari believe that understanding the root causes of conflict is more important than stopping immediate violence. And they're wrong? They're not wrong, Kim said carefully. Their approaches work well for their societies, but they all have one thing in common. When faced with immediate danger to others, they hesitate, they think, they debate, they protect themselves first. Sojin thought about this. But humans don't? Humans react, Kim said. Dr. Yoon's study showed that when humans witness threats to others, their brain chemistry changes instantly. Adrenaline floods their system. Rational thought takes a backseat to protective instincts, and they act without regard for personal consequences. It's an involuntary response that happens regardless of who needs protection. Regardless of species? That was the big discovery, Kim said. The study included scenarios where humans had to choose between protecting their own kind or protecting aliens. In every case, humans consistently chose to protect whoever was in the most immediate danger, regardless of species, politics, or personal relationships. Sojin felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. So when the Zephyri were dying, Captain Lee and his team didn't think about the fact that they were a different species, or that helping them might create political complications, or that they might die in the attempt. They just saw people who needed help and moved to provide it. And the other species noticed this? Kim nodded. The study was classified for 3 years, but the conclusions eventually became public knowledge. It showed that humans were the only species that could be relied upon to act immediately in defense of others, regardless of the political or personal cost. That's why we're allowed to carry weapons, Sojin said slowly, because they know we'll use them to protect everyone, not just ourselves. Exactly, Kim said. After the Senate protection incident, the weapons ban was modified. Humans were exempted because the other species realized something important. In a crisis, humans were the only ones who would definitely fight to protect them. So, Jin looked around the food court again. The various aliens seemed less alien now, more like individuals who had their own ways of dealing with problems. But she also understood something new about her own species. We're not trusted, she said quietly. We're useful. Kim's expression grew somber. That's a harsh way to put it, but yes, the galaxy keeps us armed because they know that when danger comes, humans will be the ones standing between threats and innocent lives. Not because we're heroes, but because we can't help ourselves. Dr. Yoon called it a syndrome for a reason, Sojin said. She did, because from a survival standpoint, what humans do is actually pretty stupid. Risking your life for strangers, especially strangers from different species, makes no evolutionary sense. But we do it anyway, every time, without fail. As they prepared to return to the afternoon session, Sojin felt the weight of her sidearm again. But now she understood it differently. It wasn't a privilege or a mark of trust. It was a tool that other species allowed her to carry because they knew she would use it for their benefit even at the cost of her own life. The afternoon session should be interesting, Kim said as they walked back toward the chambers. We're voting on some controversial mining rights today. These kinds of votes sometimes bring out the worst in people. Sojin nodded, but her mind was still processing everything she had learned. As they passed through security again, the blue-skinned officer gave them the same respectful nod as before. But now Sojin understood what that nod really meant. It wasn't respect for humans as a superior species. It was gratitude to the species that had volunteered, through their very nature, to be the galaxy's unpaid bodyguards. The afternoon session had been going on for 2 hours when Sojin noticed Ambassador Kim passing her a small data pad. On the screen was a simple message. Meet me in conference room 7 after session ends. Time you learned the rest. Sojin spent the remaining hour only half listening to the debates about mining rights and trade agreements. Her mind kept returning to the story of Captain Jinsu Lee and the Senate protection incident. Every time she looked at the other species in the chamber, she found herself wondering what they really thought about humans. When the session finally ended, she made her way to conference room 7. It was a small meeting space with walls made of the same transparent material as the station's windows. Through them, she could see stars and the distant glow of nearby planets. Ambassador Kim was already there, along with another human she didn't recognize. The stranger was older, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had spent years in the military. Sojin, this is Senator Woo Jin Nam, Kim said. He was present during the original discussions about modifying the weapons ban. Senator Nam stood and shook her hand. His grip was firm, and his eyes held the same serious expression she had seen in Kim's earlier. Hyunwoo tells me you've learned about the Senate protection incident, Nam said. Good. It's time you understood what really happened afterward. I thought Ambassador Kim explained that, Sojin said. He told you about Dr. Yoon's study and how it led to humans being exempted from the weapons ban, Nam said. But there's more to the story, things that most species prefer not to discuss openly. Kim activated a holographic display in the center of the room. Documents and images appeared in the air above the table, all marked with various levels of security classification. After Dr. Yoon published her findings, Kim said, the Senate commissioned additional studies. They wanted to understand exactly how different species responded to various types of threats. What they found was uncomfortable for everyone involved. The K display showed a series of test scenarios. Sojin read through them quickly. Simulated attacks on diplomatic missions, hostage situations, natural disasters requiring immediate response. They ran these simulations with volunteers from every species, Nam explained. Hundreds of different scenarios, thousands of participants. The results were consistent across all tests. What kind of results? Sojin asked. Kim touched a control, and the display changed to show statistical data. When faced with immediate threats to others, the Velthari took an average of 4 minutes and 37 seconds to decide on a course of action. The Mordan took 6 minutes and 12 seconds. The Luxari took over 8 minutes, and humans, 12 seconds, Nam said quietly. On average, humans began taking action to protect others within 12 seconds of identifying a threat. Sojin stared at the numbers. That's a huge difference. It gets worse, Kim said. He changed the display again. These numbers show what happened when the simulated threat specifically targeted the volunteer's own species versus other species. The new data made Sojin's stomach turn. Every other species showed significant delays when the threat was to aliens rather than their own kind. Some species took 2 or 3 times longer to respond when non-members of their species were in danger. And humans? She asked. Though she suspected she already knew the answer. No difference, Nam said. Whether the threat was to humans or aliens, the response time was the same. 12 seconds. Sojin sat down heavily in one of the chairs. They tested this to see if we would actually protect them. They did, Kim confirmed. And the results terrified them. Terrified them? Why? Nam leaned forward. Sojin, what do you think would happen if humans decided not to protect other species anymore? The question hit her like a physical blow. She had never considered the possibility, but now that it was in front of her, the implications were staggering. The galaxy would be much more dangerous, she said slowly. Exactly, Kim said. After these studies were completed, several species ran their own classified analyses. They wanted to know what would happen if humanity ever became hostile, or if humans simply decided to stop intervening in conflicts that didn't directly involve them. The holographic display changed again, showing what looked like military projections and casualty estimates. Sojin didn't understand all the technical details, but the conclusions were clear enough. They realized that human protection isn't just helpful, Nam said. It's essential. Without humans willing to intervene immediately in conflicts, the galaxy would probably tear itself apart within a generation. But that's good, isn't it? Sojin said. It means we're valued, that we're making a difference. Kim and Nam exchanged a look that made Sojin's heart sink. There's something else, Kim said gently. Something that took me years to understand. The other species don't just rely on human protection. They've started to expect it. What do you mean? Nam activated another display. This one showed incident reports from across the galaxy over the past decade. Space pirate attacks, terrorist incidents, natural disasters, diplomatic crises. Look at the response patterns, Nam said. In every single case where humans were present, other species waited for humans to take the lead. They've stopped developing their own rapid response capabilities because they know humans will handle it. Sojin studied the reports. The pattern was undeniable. In situations where human security forces were present, Other species consistently delayed their own responses. They had become dependent on human intervention. It's worse than that, Kim said. Some species have actually reduced their own security budgets. Why spend resources on emergency response when humans will do it for free? For free? Think about it, Nam said. Humans don't charge other species for protection. We don't demand payment when human security officers die protecting alien diplomats. We do it because we can't help ourselves, and they know it. The room fell silent. Sojin stared at the data floating in the air above the table, trying to process what she was learning. So when that Velthari counselor asked if humans were the galaxy's most trusted peacekeepers, she said finally, the real answer is that we're the galaxy's most useful peacekeepers. That's part of it, Kim said. But there's another element. The other species have also realized something else about humans that they find convenient, which is? We're predictably self-destructive, Nam said bluntly. Every other species prioritizes its own survival above all else, but humans will sacrifice themselves for strangers without hesitation. From a political standpoint, that makes us incredibly useful and completely non-threatening. Non-threatening? Think about it, Kim explained. A species that consistently puts others' welfare ahead of its own survival can never be an expansionist threat. Humans will never conquer the galaxy because we're too busy protecting everyone else in it. So Jin felt something cold settle in her stomach. They're not afraid of us because they know we'll never hurt them. Exactly, Nam said. And they know that no matter how badly they treat us, or how much they take advantage of our protective instincts, we'll keep protecting them anyway. Because we can't help it, Sojin whispered. Because we can't help it, Kim confirmed. Doctor, Yoon's syndrome isn't just a description of human behavior. It's a guarantee that other species can rely on no matter what. The holographic display flickered off, leaving them in the soft light from the windows. Sojin looked out at the stars and thought about all the worlds out there, filled with beings who went to sleep each night knowing that humans stood guard over their safety. Does anyone else know about this? She asked. I mean, do regular people back on Earth understand what we're really doing out here? Some do, Nam said. But it's not the kind of thing you put in recruitment brochures. Join the diplomatic service and become the galaxy's unpaid bodyguard doesn't have quite the right ring to it. Most humans who work in galactic affairs figure it out eventually, Kim added. The smart ones learn to live with it. The ones who can't handle it usually find reasons to go back to Earth. Sojin thought about her training, her dreams of making a difference in galactic politics, her excitement at being chosen for this assignment. It all seemed naive now. I know what you're thinking, Kim said softly. You're wondering if this is what you signed up for. Did you ever think about quitting? She asked. Every day for the first year, Kim admitted. But then I realized something. The fact that other species take advantage of human nature doesn't change the fact that people are alive because of what we do. Those 17 Zephyri that Captain Lee saved, they went home to their families, they had children, contributed to their communities, lived full lives. Does that make it worth it? That's for you to decide, Nam said. But I'll tell you this. The galaxy is safer because humans exist. Not perfect, not fair, but safer. Sometimes that has to be enough. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Sojin felt like she was seeing everything with different eyes. The weight of her sidearm felt different now. It wasn't just a weapon or a symbol of authority. It was a tool that other species allowed her to carry because they knew she would use it for their benefit, even if they never acknowledged the true cost of that protection. Tomorrow there's a new junior attaché arriving, Kim said as they walked toward the residential sections of the station. Minho Jung. 3 weeks had passed since Sojin's first day at the Galactic Senate. She had settled into a routine of attending sessions, filing reports, and slowly understanding the complex politics that kept hundreds of species working together. The weight of what she had learned about humanity's role still pressed on her mind, but Ambassador Kim had been right about one thing. Some truths became easier to carry with time. The morning session was focused on a controversial mining proposal for the Kepler 442 system. The debate had been going on for days, with various species arguing about environmental protection versus economic development. So-Jin was taking notes when she noticed something odd. The Velthari delegation was acting strangely. Instead of their usual careful, measured participation in the debate, they seemed nervous. Councillor Zixem kept looking toward the exits, and his crystal body was dimmer than usual. Other crystal beings in their section were doing the same thing. Ambassador, So-Jin whispered to Kim, who was sitting beside her. Something's wrong with the Velthari. Kim looked across the chamber and frowned. You're right. They look like they're getting ready to leave. Before either of them could say more, the chamber's main light suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a red glow that made the vast space feel smaller and more threatening. Attention, members of the Galactic Senate, a voice said over the chamber's communication system. The voice was human, speaking in accented English. This session is now under our control. So-Jin felt her heart start racing. Around the chamber, she could see various species reacting to the announcement. The Mordan were sealing their water tanks, just as Kim had described from the Senate protection incident. The Luxari were clustering together, their energy forms pulsing with what might have been communication or fear. My name is Kaijun Seo, the voice continued, and I represent the Human Liberation Front. For too long, our species has served as unpaid guardians for beings who see us as nothing more than useful tools. So-Jin looked at Kim, whose face had gone pale. The Human Liberation Front? Extremist group, Kim whispered back. They believe humans should dominate the galaxy instead of protecting it. Most people thought they were just angry talk on internet forums. Today, that ends, Seo's voice continued. We have taken control of this station's security systems and placed explosive devices throughout the Senate chamber. Several delegates from different species are now our hostages, and they will remain so until our demands are met. Around the chamber, So-Jin could see the truth of this statement. Groups of armed humans in black uniforms had appeared at various exits and were herding delegates from different sections toward the center of the chamber. She counted at least a dozen hostages already. Velthari, Mordan, Zephyri, and others. Our demands are simple, Seo announced. First, the Galactic Senate will officially recognize human supremacy in matters of security and defense. Second, all species will pay tribute to Earth in exchange for continued human protection. Third, humans will assume leadership positions in all major galactic institutions. This is insane, So-Jin breathed. It's also exactly what everyone's been afraid of, Kim said grimly. A human faction that decides to use our protective instincts for selfish purposes instead of the common good. As if to prove his point, So-Jin watched the other species' reactions around the chamber. The Velthari who weren't hostages had formed a discussion circle and appeared to be debating proper response procedures. The Mordan had sealed themselves in their tanks completely. Even the Rexthani, usually quick to take charge, were calling for calm and order while they assessed the situation. But the humans were different. So-Jin could see human delegates and security personnel throughout the chamber, and they were all focused on the same thing, the hostages. Several were slowly moving closer to where the terrorists held their prisoners, their hands moving toward their weapons. Attention, human personnel, Seo's voice boomed again. Any attempt to interfere with our operation will result in the immediate execution of hostages. We know your weaknesses better than anyone. The movement among the human delegates stopped. So-Jin realized with a sick feeling that Seo was right. He knew that humans couldn't help but try to protect the hostages, and he was using that knowledge against them. We're trapped, she whispered to Kim. If we try to help, he'll kill the hostages. But if we don't try to help, we can't help ourselves, Kim finished. I know. As if reading her mind, Ambassador Kim began to stand up slowly. Around the chamber, other humans were doing the same thing. So-Jin grabbed his arm. What are you doing? He said he'd kill the hostages. So-Jin, Kim said quietly, not taking his eyes off the hostages in the center of the chamber. What do you think will happen to those hostages if we do nothing? The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Seo and his followers weren't planning to let the hostages go. They needed leverage to maintain control, and dead hostages would eliminate that leverage, which meant, "He's going to kill them anyway," she said. "Probably," Kim confirmed. "Which means our choice isn't between saving them or not saving them. It's between dying while trying to save them or watching them die while we do nothing." Around the chamber, So-Jin could see the same realization dawning on other humans. They were all slowly reaching for their weapons, knowing that they were likely walking into a trap, but unable to stop themselves. "This is what he's counting on," she said desperately. "He knows we can't help ourselves." "He's right," Kim said, "but there's something he might not have considered." "What's that?" Kim smiled grimly and looked directly at her. "He's human too." Before So-Jin could ask what he meant, Kim was moving, not toward the hostages but toward the nearest terrorist position. His sidearm was in his hand, and he was shouting something to the other human delegates. Understanding flooded through So-Jin's mind. SEO and his followers were human, which meant they had the same protective instincts as everyone else. If the human delegates threatened other humans instead of trying to rescue the alien hostages, she drew her own weapon and followed Kim. Around the chamber, the pattern was repeating. Human delegates and security personnel were moving not toward the hostages but toward the terrorists, and the terrorists were reacting exactly as Kim had predicted. "Stand down," one of the terrorists yelled. "We'll kill the hostages." But several terrorists had turned their weapons away from the alien prisoners and toward the approaching humans. It was an automatic response, the same protective instinct that made humans shield strangers from danger. Even terrorists couldn't completely override it. The next few minutes were chaos. So-Jin found herself in the middle of a firefight, using her diplomatic training table for cover, while armed humans battled each other across the Senate chamber. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humans fighting humans to protect aliens who couldn't protect themselves. She saw Ambassador Kim tackle one of the terrorists near the Velthari hostages. The man was larger than Kim and armed, but Kim had surprise on his side. They went down together, fighting for control of the weapon. So-Jin made a decision that surprised her. Instead of staying in cover, she ran toward them. Not because she had a plan, but because Kim needed help. Her training kicked in and she managed to disarm the terrorist while Kim held him down. "The hostages," Kim gasped, pointing toward the group of aliens who had been abandoned when their guards joined the fight. "Get them to safety." So-Jin looked at the alien delegates. They were huddled together, looking confused and terrified. The Velthari were trying to discuss what they should do, but their usual careful deliberation was useless in a crisis. The Mordan had retreated completely into their environmental suits. The others seemed paralyzed by the sudden violence. "This way," she called to them, waving toward an emergency exit that seemed clear of fighting. "Quickly!" It took several precious seconds for them to understand and start moving. So-Jin realized she was experiencing firsthand what Dr. Yoon's study had documented. In a crisis, other species simply couldn't react as quickly as humans. Even when their lives were in immediate danger, they needed time to process, discuss, and decide. She shepherded them toward safety while the battle continued around them. More station security had arrived, all human, and they were systematically overwhelming the terrorists. The whole fight lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the lights came back on and the immediate danger was over, So-Jin found herself sitting on the floor of the Senate chamber, breathing heavily and trying to understand what had just happened. Around her, human security officers were treating the wounded and securing the area. The alien delegates she had helped to safety were slowly emerging from their hiding places. Security Chief Dong-Hyun Lim approached her as she was checking her weapon. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of calm presence that made people feel safer. "Good work today," he said simply. "You did exactly what needed to be done." "I almost got killed," So-Jin said, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. "Yes," Lim agreed. "But you did it anyway. That's what makes the difference." As medical personnel tended to the wounded and investigators began interviewing witnesses, So-Jin realized that she had just lived through her own version of the Senate protection incident humans had once again risked. 6 months after the terrorist attack, Sojin stood in the memorial gardens of New Geneva Station. The space was quiet and peaceful, with soft light filtering through the transparent dome above. Around her, representatives from dozens of species had gathered for the dedication ceremony of a new memorial wall. 3 names were carved into the dark stone: Captain Jinsu Lee, Security Officer Mingyu Park, and Diplomat Hyejin Oh. They were the humans who had died stopping Kaijun Seo's attack on the Senate chambers. Their sacrifice had saved the lives of 28 alien delegates and prevented what could have been the end of the Galactic Senate. Sojin watched as various species paid their respects. The Velthari had created beautiful crystal formations that caught the light and threw rainbows across the memorial. The Mordan had contributed a flowing water feature that played soft, musical sounds. Even the normally reclusive Luxari had provided energy patterns that danced across the wall in constantly changing displays of light. Ambassador Kim stood beside her, his arm still in a sling from the injuries he had suffered during the attack. His recovery had been slow, but he had insisted on attending every session of the Senate since then. He said it was important for humans to be visibly present and ready to protect others, especially after what Seo had tried to do. "It's beautiful," Sojin said, looking at the memorial. "They really went all out." "They always do," Kim replied. "After humans die protecting them, other species are very generous with their gratitude. Beautiful memorials, moving speeches, official declarations of friendship." There was something in his tone that made Sojin look at him more closely. But tomorrow they'll go back to taking our protection for granted," Kim said quietly. "They'll reduce their own security budgets a little more, rely on us a little more heavily, and expect us to be ready to die for them again when the next crisis comes." Sojin had learned enough in the past months to understand what he meant. The attack had actually made things worse in some ways. Other species had been so impressed by the human response that several had formally requested permanent human security details for their important facilities. Earth was struggling to meet the demand for human protection services that everyone expected to be provided for free. "Sometimes I wonder if Captain Lee knew what he was starting," Kim said. "When he rushed to help those Zephyri delegates 46 years ago, did he understand that he was establishing a precedent that would define humanity's role in the galaxy forever?" Before Sojin could answer, a young human approached them. He was nervous and excited, with the kind of energy that reminded her of herself 6 months ago. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Ambassador Kim? I'm Minho Jung, the new junior attaché. I was told to report to you." Sojin felt a strange mix of emotions as she looked at the newcomer. He was so young, so eager to make a difference in galactic politics. She remembered having those same dreams. "Welcome to New Geneva Station," Kim said warmly. "Sojin, would you mind showing Minho around? I have some meetings to attend." As Kim walked away, Sojin found herself alone with the new attaché. Minho was looking around the memorial gardens with wonder, clearly impressed by the display of interspecies cooperation and friendship. "This is amazing," he said. "All these different species working together to honor fallen heroes. It's exactly what I hoped to see when I joined the diplomatic service." Sojin almost smiled at his enthusiasm. "What do you know about the people whose names are on that wall?" "They died protecting alien delegates during a terrorist attack," Minho said promptly. "Captain Lee was the human who established the precedent that led to humans being allowed to carry weapons in Senate gatherings. The others died following his example, putting the safety of others ahead of their own." "That's the official version," Sojin said. "What else have you been told about human weapons policy?" Minho looked confused by the question. "Just that humans are the most trusted species in the galaxy when it comes to peacekeeping. That's why we're allowed to carry weapons when others aren't. It's a mark of respect and faith in our commitment to protecting innocent lives." Sojin studied his face. She could see herself 6 months ago, full of pride in humanity's reputation and excited about being part of something noble and important. The memory of that innocence felt both precious and painful. "Minho," she said carefully, "what would you do if I told you there was more to the story? That the real reasons for human weapons policy are more complicated than what you've been taught?" "What do you mean?" Jin looked around the memorial gardens. Other humans were scattered throughout the crowd, all of them armed, all of them quietly, watching for any signs of trouble even at a peaceful ceremony. It was automatic behavior, as natural as breathing. They couldn't help themselves. "I mean that humans don't carry weapons because we're trusted," she said finally. "We carry weapons because we're useful, because when danger comes, we're the only species that can be counted on to act immediately, without regard for our own safety or the political consequences." Minho's expression shifted from confusion to something that might have been alarm. "That doesn't sound right. I've studied galactic history. Humans are respected throughout the galaxy for our commitment to peace and justice." "We are," Jin agreed. "But respect and trust aren't the same thing as understanding. Most species appreciate what we do for them, but they don't really comprehend why we do it. They think it's a choice we make, a policy decision by our government. They don't realize it's a compulsion we can't control." She gestured toward the memorial wall. "Those 3 people didn't die because they were ordered to protect alien delegates. They died because they couldn't help themselves when they saw innocent beings in danger. Just like Captain Lee before them. Just like the humans who will die in the next crisis after this one." Minho was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had said. Around them, the memorial ceremony continued, with speakers from various species praising human sacrifice and dedication to galactic peace. "Are you saying that humans are being taken advantage of?" he asked finally. "I'm saying that humans are exactly what the galaxy needs us to be," Jin replied. "The question is whether that's what we need for ourselves." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Jin found herself walking with Minho through the station corridors. She remembered making this same walk 6 months ago, full of questions and confusion about humanity's role in galactic politics. "How long did it take you to figure all this out?" Minho asked. "About 3 months to understand the facts," Jin said. 6 months to accept them. I'm still working on being okay with them." They passed through a security checkpoint, and Jin watched Minho notice the same thing she had noticed on her first day. Other species surrendered their weapons and tools, but humans walked through armed and ready for action. The security officers nodded respectfully to them, but Jin now understood that the respect was mixed with relief. Relief that someone else would handle any problems that might arise. "Do you ever think about quitting?" Minho asked. "Going back to Earth and finding a different career?" Jin had asked Kim the same question months ago. Now she was on the other side of the conversation, trying to help someone else understand what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of species that depended on them. "Every day," she admitted. "But then I think about what would happen if we weren't here. Who would protect the Zephyri the next time someone tries to poison them? Who would stop the terrorists when they take hostages? Who would rush toward danger when everyone else is running away from it? Other species would have to learn to protect themselves. Maybe," Jin said. "Or maybe the galaxy would just become a much more dangerous place. Maybe species would start dying while their governments debate the proper response procedures. Maybe the Senate would collapse because no one could guarantee anyone else's safety." They reached the residential section of the station, where Minho would be staying during his assignment. As they prepared to part ways, he asked the question that Jin had been expecting. Was it worth it, learning the truth about all this? Jin thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, she had been excited about representing humanity in galactic politics. Now she understood that she was really serving as humanity's contribution to galactic security, whether she wanted to or not. The role came with dangers she hadn't anticipated and responsibilities she hadn't chosen, but it also came with something else. The knowledge that her presence made a difference. That because she was here, armed and ready to act, other beings could go about their lives with a little less fear. That when crises came, someone would stand between innocent people and those who wanted to harm them. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said finally. "After you've had time to understand what it really means to be human in a galaxy that needs us more than we need them." As she walked back to her own quarters, Jin passed a group of young aliens who were laughing and talking loudly in the corridor. They were students, probably here on some kind of educational exchange. and they seemed carefree in the way that only people who feel completely safe can be. They didn't notice her as she walked by, didn't pay attention to the weapon on her belt, or think about the role she played in their security.